found in the woods today is sure of a big surprise.
This was the most terrifying moment of my life, always will be. My family and a family friend's family were going on a hiking trip to the Appalachian Mountains. We had rented cabins at a camping site and had arranged certain paths to follow each day of our trip that we would walk each day, 4 days long. The first 3 days went great. We saw wildlife, had a good time and talked a lot. But on the fourth day, we were taking a trail that was more secluded and overgrown than the others. We were walking for about 30 minutes when I was hit with this overwhelming feeling of uneasiness. The feeling just stayed there no matter how hard I tried to beat it back. Then, and everyone else on the hike denies this, but I hear singing in a language I've never heard before. It's like the scene described in the myth of the sirens, sweet and enchanting. Yet the music invoked a feeling of fear down to my bones. Everyone else seems completely oblivious to it. I tried telling my dad that something was wrong, but he just told me I was probably tired and we would stop soon. So about 5 minutes later, and the singing just keeps getting louder, and my heart was racing. We had stopped to rest and eat something as well. I wish with all my heart that we hadn't stopped. About 2 minutes into our little rest, the singing is getting progressively louder, but my nerves have settled slightly. Then, everything falls silent. Everyone in our group, about 12 people, suddenly turns to the trees to our left. A figure, tall and in a black coat, was barely visible between the trees. It was a woman, much taller than normal people are, with pure white hair flowing out of her hood. Her head is down, but her face is still slightly visible. All I can make out is that her skin is a very pale yellow, like old paper. As we watch, she just stalks closer to our group, finally stopping right at the edge of the trees. She looks up, and I swear to God, as long as I live and breathe, I will never forget her face. Her eyes were completely white, with no pupils or irises visible. She had a thin, pointed nose, and had a mouth with lips that were stained red. I don't want to know why. She stares at us for a moment, and then smiles. It was horrifying. She had no teeth, and her eyes began to shine. She then begins to talk. She had a horrible, scratchy, high-pitched voice, and said,
"Leave this place while you still can. I'll be watching you. Don't try anything."
I blink, and she's gone. Everyone is silent. This is the first time telling this story to anyone else who didn't experience this with me. And I never discuss it with anyone who did experience this with me. It feels good to share this experience with someone. So, this is something that I've kept to myself for 2 years now, and every time I think about it, the hair all over my body still stands up. Here's some context. My girlfriend and I really like to try and find new hikes in western Colorado. We decided to try a new trail that was not on the national monument and was way away from any other trail. It was a good deal of the way out of town as well. Anyways, we were one of the only cars parked at the trailhead, and as soon as we were walking, it quickly got dark. We made it all the way until the moon rose, and I stopped to hug my girlfriend and have a romantic moment. All of a sudden, further down the trail, at least a few miles, we hear automatic gunfire. Pop, 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 then silence for a couple of seconds. Pop, pop, pop. Now, this is kind of a normal thing for my area. Even though this was not public land, I had a lot of buddies who would know of many forgotten trails to shoot on and not get caught. My girlfriend asked me if I thought they were gunshots, and I told her that I couldn't think of anything else in the middle of this wilderness. We decided it would be best to turn back. We were about 2 miles down the trail at this point, at the top of a very large hill, covered in desert shrubs. As soon as we stopped talking, we realized something was wrong. All of the insects had stopped chirping, and there had been dozens of crickets the entire hike up. All of the sounds of nature completely stopped. My girlfriend was facing further down the trail, and I was facing back the way we came, ready to turn back. She looks behind me, then screams and starts to run. I was already scared shitless, but I figured the worst it could be is some drunk redneck about to give us some trouble. I turned and looked where she looked, and I immediately ran after her. I've never ran so fast in my life. The shrubs were about 2 to 3 feet high in varying spots, and when I turned around, I don't know how to describe it, but it looked like a shadow. Even with the moonlight shining directly on it, it was almost an absence of light. It was already slowly standing up when I turned around. As soon as it fully rose up, I realized that I was looking up at it, and it had to be at least a foot taller than me. It had a very skin and bones figure, but it was not human. We sprinted back to my car, still with nature silent the whole way. I was in such a hurry when we ran to my car that neither of us noticed I hadn't needed to take out my keys to unlock the car. We were halfway through the drive home when we realized that every single hair on my body was raised, and if I'm being honest, I've never felt anything like what I did when I saw it. Every fiber of my being screamed, "Run," and I was almost paralyzed by the fear that washed over me. Does anyone have any idea what it could have been? So this happened last year in Virginia, and is also the reason I never backpack alone anymore. I was taking summer courses at the time, and we ended up with a 3-day weekend in June, so I thought it was a great time to go explore some of the Virginian wilderness. I did a Google search and found a state park with a trail that looked nice, and let my roommate and family know the trail I was going to be on. When I got close to the park area, I saw a little outdoor shop where people hiking the Appalachian Trail stop. I went in to grab a map of the area just in case I got lost. As I was talking to the owner, he mentioned a trail that's not well known and has a pretty waterfall and swimming hole. This piqued my interest, so I had him show me on the map. It took me outside the state park, but he said it was a great place to go. I paid for the map and thanked the owner. I texted my roommate and parents about the new trail and parked my car and set off on my adventure. I should note that the waterfall was going to be a side trip for my journey. I was planning 3 days, 2 nights. I started on part of the Appalachian Trail, and it was pretty packed with people, and some of them were really fun to talk to. As expected, as I got further and further from the main trails, I saw less and less people. Around early afternoon, 3 miles from my destination, I noticed it was unnaturally silent. No birds, no bugs, not even wind, and I had a feeling of being watched. I shook it off as me overanalyzing the situation. I got to the waterfall, and it wasn't too spectacular, but it was cool to look at. Plus, it had a good sized area to swim in, so naturally, I stripped down to my skivvies and took a dip. It was pretty refreshing. As I was getting my clothes back on, I started whistling to myself. It was Chill Bill because it was stuck in my head. That's when I heard something whistle the same tune back. I thought it was a bird copying me, so I went back and forth with it, and it'd repeat whenever I whistled. I thought it was pretty neat. As I was setting up camp, I couldn't shake this feeling that I was being watched again, like I'd get goosebumps, and my hairs would stand up. As night fell, I built a small fire and lit my jet boil to make dinner. As I did this, I became hyper aware that, again, there was no sound, just deafening silence. Some part of my brain was telling me that I'm not safe and to leave. I ignored it and crawled into my tent with my flashlight and book. I went to sleep without incident. When I woke up the next morning, my sight was trashed. My camp stool was nowhere to be found. My bear bag with my food was cut down and the contents were thrown across the site. My first thought was a crafty animal chewed through the rope and got at the bag, but I looked at the rope and it was cut with something very sharp. Plus, none of the food was even touched. I also noticed bare footprints all around my campsite. Keep in mind, I'm at least 6 to 8 miles from the road. As I was looking at the mess, I heard a branch snap off in the distance. I turned to look in that direction. I saw nothing, but I heard that whistling again. My whistle from yesterday. But it was different. It sounded more sinister. It made my hair stand on end, and this is when I listened to my instincts to get the hell out. It sounded like it was a little off in the distance, so I packed up my camp as fast as I could. The whistling got closer as I finished stuffing my tent into my bag. I didn't bother with putting away anything properly. The whistling was incessant and sounded like it was coming from all directions. I got fed up with the whistling, so I stood up and yelled into the woods, "Shut up!" and "What the hell do you want?" It stopped whistling, and it was quiet for a moment. Then it repeated what I said, in my voice. It sounded just like me, but distorted, like it came from an old TV. After I heard this, I immediately threw my bag on and ran the direction I came. I heard it moving just behind me, fast switching between the whistle and my voice. It felt like it was toying with me, not actually too close, but not being too far. Eventually, it sounded like it got further and further away from me. Then it stopped suddenly. When it stopped, I stopped and turned around. I wish I didn't, because I heard the most bone-chilling screech ever, coming from right next to me. That's when I started running again. I didn't look, I only ran. Less than a half mile, I ran into a couple that was also backpacking. They saw the look of terror on my face and asked if that was me that screamed, and asked if I was okay. I told them about what happened, and they decided not to go down to where I came from. We moved to a more populated trail as quickly as we could. As soon as I got back to my car, I drove to one of the park's ranger stations and reported what happened. Since the site was off park grounds, they told me it wasn't in their jurisdiction, but they'll send a ranger to investigate. The ranger station's parking lot runs right up to the woods, and when I was getting into my Jeep, I heard the Chill Bill tune coming from the woods just in front of me. I never drove so fast in my life. When I told my roommate why I was back after only going one night, all he said was, "Bro, I'm never going camping with you." So, we were deciding to go somewhere haunted during the day. There's this cemetery in Santa Cruz we decided to check out. We go in and walk around and nothing out of the ordinary happened, so we decide to leave. The cemetery is on a supposed haunted road that leads up into the woods. This road is said to be haunted by a lady in white that tries to hitchhike into your car. I'd forgotten this fact until after the day. Alright, so along this road we're driving down, it leads into a forest area. A couple of miles down from the cemetery, you can pull to the side of the road and walk along this hiking trail. So we decided to hike this trail because I completely forgot the road was also haunted, so I wasn't even looking for anything paranormal. Anyways, we start hiking this trail in the afternoon. 10 minutes into the trail, we stumble along abandoned train tracks and a barely standing bridge for the train that used to run along those tracks. It looks cool, so we decide to go down this hill, right by the bridge that lets you go under the dilapidated bridge. We go down there and just mess around, looking at the cool architecture. After we had our view, we start back up the little hill that leads back to the trail. When we get to the top, we are a little exhausted because the hill is kind of steep, and you have to use the trees around you as leverage to climb back up. So we're standing around, back on the trail, when we both notice something out of the ordinary. We hear a voice, like a grown man shouting and screaming very angrily. When I say angry, I mean angry. This voice sounded like a rage-filled, hatefully murderous man. We quiet down, and I can tell the voice is very far away. Almost sounded like it was in the mountains around us. Sounded more than 500 feet away for sure. We both look at each other like, WTF is that? We stand around listening for like 15 seconds, and next thing we know, the voice came down the trail from what sounded like hundreds of feet away to being like right down the end of the trail. The inhuman speed the voice came closer to us with was unnatural. I noticed the voice coming from down the trail, and I'm thinking to myself, this voice sounds like it's from someone who was about to kill someone out of rage. But the weird thing is that the voice is speaking in what I can only call gibberish. I understood not one word it was saying. I instantly get this fight or flight feeling all in my body because this voice starts getting very loud and closer to us at inhuman speeds. I tell my brother to pick up some huge sticks with me to defend ourselves because even though the voice came out of nowhere and moved down the trail at lightning speeds, I still had the assumption it was some kind of crazy person ready to kill someone. We pick up the sticks and run down the trail back to the car. Now, here's the weird part. As we are running away from this voice that's coming down the other side of the trail, I hear the voice come up behind us in an instant. It sounded like he was no more than 10 feet behind us, chasing us back to the car. I turn around, even though I don't want to, because I have to see how close this psycho is from us. As I look back and hear the voice right behind me, I see no one. I tell my brother to run faster because the voice is right behind us, yelling in absolute rage, but I see no one chasing us. We start picking up speed, and the craziest thing in my life happened. The voice starts panning around us in 360 audio. I hear the voice yelling in gibberish right behind me. Then it starts panning to my left through the trees, just off the trail. Then the voice is right in front of us, and it slides into the right side of the trail, then back behind us in a matter of 10 seconds. At this point, me and my brother are very creeped out and ran the rest of the trail back to the car. The voice kept following us down the trail. I remember, after hearing the voice panning around us and hearing it reverberate through the woods, I started praying to Jesus Christ to help me come out of here alive. After we make it around halfway down the trail to my car, the voice disappears. I remember slowing down exhausted, and we start talking about what we heard. I asked my brother if he also heard the voice slide in circles around us, and he said he heard it too. At that point, I knew I wasn't hallucinating or imagining it. I asked my brother if he heard how it sounded like gibberish, but like a man screaming at the top of his lungs in rage. He said he heard the same thing. We finally get into the car and I drive out of there in a heartbeat. I remember the car ride was silent for like 5 minutes as we just sat there thinking about what happened. That's when I remembered that the whole road was haunted and not just the cemetery. I'd been down that trail alone a few months before this experience and nothing weird happened. This was one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced in my entire life. To this day, I've never been back down that trail and never planned on it either. Everything I've written down is the absolute truth, and nothing has been altered. The Santa Cruz area and mountains are known for cults and very dark magic being performed in them. Stay safe out there, everyone.
Hello watchers and listeners,
Thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.